Hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. This is episode 96, where I was privileged to have Amandine Flachs on the podcast today. She is the CEO and co-founder of WildMeta. She is also VC Scout, producer and host of Entrepreneurs Play Games. We talked about a number of things about what is going on in the world of the land of VCs as well as companies and founders. We also talked about her company as well. She founded WildMeta and her YouTube show as well, Entrepreneur Playing Games, it's a very interesting young lady, and I think big things are in store for her in the future. So please sit back, enjoy the show, and have an awesome day. Peace. Hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. This is episode 96, where I have the immense pleasure of having Amandine Flachs on today. She is... Let me just clear my throat for this bit. Okay. She is a CEO, business starter, founder of WildMeta. She is a VC scout, interesting. And she is the producer, host of Entrepreneurs Play Games. How are you today, my lady?
I am doing very well, and I am so excited to be here with you today.
Pleasure. The pleasure's all mine. I've got to say, you hail from France, the city of the lights, right?
Yes, apparently.
Yeah. What brings you over to my fair city of London?
I moved here about 5 years ago, and what happened is that before moving to London, I used to live in the US. I used to live in California for a while, and when I got back to France, when I got back to Paris, it was so French, and so I really missed the international culture, and going out and meeting people from all over the place. And so I was in a professional situation where I was looking for a move, and my partner was also in the same situation, and we were like, well, why should we limit our search to Paris? Let's just try to find something else outside of Paris or outside of France. And so London was an easy choice,
Excellent. So it's via California to London, and this is the thing. When you came to London, was it a case of you were just doing the same thing you were doing in California, or is it a case of you just finding those sort of buds of new inspiration?
I'd say I've always worked in the startup ecosystem. When I moved to London, I stayed in the same kind of environment and industry I was in France, but because it was a very new environment, and the fact that I was working in this ecosystem in France gave me some kind of advantage. But I've always been in the startup ecosystem and new technologies. So I kind of stayed in the same thing, but in the same time, I worked in a very different way when I moved to London, because I didn't really join one company. Instead, I worked as an independent consultant. So this way I could work with lots of different people, lots of different companies, the way I want and the way they needed it. So I didn't really feel the pressure to just join one company and be an employee again as I was before.
Yes, the choice, variety, as they say, is the spice of life. So with that, coming over here, when did you sort of decide to come up with a YouTube channel for entrepreneurs playing games?
So that was actually, it happened quite naturally. So what happened is that because I've been involved in the startup scene for so many years, I have been going to so many events, like networking events. And in London, you can go to networking events every single night. You have events happening all the time. But the thing is, I felt that there was something kind of missing, because when you go to events, you just hear from people who are already successful. And, you know, people who've done that like 10 years ago, and they're already on their third startup and, you know, already at a stage where they have been invited there to speak to the audience for that. And the thing is, when you go to these kind of events, yes, you listen to the people speaking, but also you sometimes have the opportunity to ask your questions, but not necessarily. So sometimes there is no time for questions, or you don't have the opportunity to catch up with the guests. So I realized that there were a big potential of moving that online and let everyone be able to ask their own question in the chat. So it's not just people who are joining this kind of events are not just passive in the audience, but they have a more active role. And so I'm a big fan of video games. I love video games, and I have been watching people playing games on Twitch for years. And so I really love the community building, the community aspect of the platform. They really put a lot of efforts on the community. And so I thought, if we can bring together the interaction you have in those platforms on Twitch and the startup community, we could actually put the light on lots of entrepreneurs, maybe earlier stage entrepreneurs, and create a different format. And also to spice things up. Initially, we were playing video games during the stream. So what happened is usually people come to my place. I focus on early stage founders, and then we talk about their business, but we also play video games at some point to just create some kind of intimacy, get to know each other, and be more natural on the stream.
I can only imagine like sort of gaming rage coming out at some point.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, startups is all about the people, and especially early stage. Okay, you have the idea, but when you're still, I don't know, pre-revenue or even pre-product and still working on the development of your business, you can talk about it, but you know, you don't necessarily have war stories to talk about. So it's all about the people, who they are, how they react, how they're going to build the team. So talking about what they do is one thing, but I think people are more here to understand what they're going through, who they are really, and video games is a good way for that. Some people are so into it, so passionate, and you can see physically after we play game, they kind of relax and they open up to more personal things, which is, I think, super important to understand what's going on behind the scene.
No, I like it. I like it. Since starting your channel, like what has been one of the things you've learned? What has been one of the most challenging things, and what has been a surprise that you've like picked up? Or
so I have learned so much doing that, and it's interesting because, so to answer your question, something that I found challenging is to find guests, because, you know, when you think about podcasts, for example, usually what happens is hosts set up a date, you know, they put something in the calendar for a date that works with the guest. And so you record the podcast, and then as a host and as a creator, you're just going to put it out and live at the time you want. So if you want to have some kind of regularity, which is key when you create content, you can do that. But when you're doing a format that is live, it's slightly more difficult because people need to be available at the time and day you need to. So it's slightly more difficult because when I pick the date and when I decided to do it on Saturday morning, you need to have some regularity. And so I decided to do it on Saturday morning because it doesn't conflict with any networking events. And so it can be open to more people who may have families, people who may not be in central London. So it was a choice, but also it made it very hard to find guests. Not everyone wants to record a live interview, and also not everyone gets the concept initially. So it you know, there were a big step of explaining the concept and getting guests on board. So I think getting guests and interesting guests regularly getting founders to be comfortable talking about their story is the main challenge. It's getting better because since the lockdown and the situation, I actually do it completely remotely, and so I had to ditch the video game part. So it's easier now for that because guests don't feel the pressure or the anxiety to play video games. Even if as I said, it helps relax, and every time it works really well. Still, there is some kind of apprehension before from the founders who are just not necessarily gamers, and so wonder if it's going to be okay with them, and if they're going to be good or not. And well, that's not the point, but anyway. So I would say the getting guests on board and booked for the specific day for the Saturday morning is the main challenge, and also getting a diversity of guests. Diversity is super important for me, and I want to make sure I have not just one type of founders, and so that means sometimes doing some extra miles, an extra step to convince some people and to convince some founders. Interestingly, it's slightly more difficult with women. And it's not that I have difficulty finding women founders.
Yeah.
It's just that the concept, quite often they want to wait for I don't know, for a moment that works for them before launch or something like that. And so sometimes I have to kind of send emails over and over and over again just to have at the end a no sometime. So yeah, while with men, it's the opposite. They're like, oh yeah, I want to be in your podcast. I want to be in your show. So it's very interesting. So that's the most challenging thing. That's guest. In terms of learning, I'm learning so much from every guest I have. But I have improved a lot, I think, my understanding of discussion and managing a discussion, and also, well, asking good questions, and also the entire setup. The beauty of doing live streaming is that it's live, so you can't just do lots of post-production, right? I like that, but at the same time, that means that if you mess up with the light, if the weather changes and you have natural light or something happen, then, well, it's live. You can't just change that or just say, oh, hold on a minute, I'm going to change something in the background. Yeah, that's something I've learned. And I can't remember, what was the last one? Challenge, something I've learned?
And what has been a surprise?
A surprise. I think the surprise is how addictive it is. It's very draining, and I'm 100% into it during the stream. There is a preparation and everything, and it happened a few times, actually almost all the time, where just before the stream I'm a bit stressed, especially when people used to come to my place. I was always wondering if they will actually show up, if they will have any trouble finding my place or anything. And so every time it was a lot of stress just before. But then when you're into it, you're enjoying it so much. And that has been the big surprise, is that it's every time I want to give up before, and once it's done, I'm like, okay, I can't wait for the next one. I'm so hyped right now, and I want to do it again. And you want to stay on the stream, and time flies. Sometimes you want to have the time to ask more questions to your guests. So yeah, it's very addictive and so interesting.
Yeah, like this is the thing with like what people don't understand, and I think this, like, I've recorded a number of podcasts now with people, and when you're recording like we are now, it's not live. It's much more relaxing. You can just simply go here, there, everywhere. But when you add that live element, especially if you're streaming on YouTube, Twitch, or wherever platform you might be using, there is a lot of like things which are out of your control, I would say. Like from like mad comments, what might come in, like you're like, I can imagine just reading it, and you're like kind of like going, well, I can draw you out of the actual conversation. So but bringing people to your place and doing that live stream, such a challenge, so tough. You got to be there mentally.
Yes.
Yeah. As you
But I actually find it easier to go live rather than recording something. I think that's because I'm not native. And so I hear all the small mistakes I may make. And so for
Mhm.
me, recording a video is more challenging because I just want to make it perfect, you know? And so you're always tempted to change this here and there. And so at the end, I think if I didn't started doing it live completely, I would have never done it. But I agree, it can be very challenging, especially when you have comments and you have to manage your guest, and so have to be a bit everywhere at the same time. I think sometimes when I rewatch some videos, I just think, oh, I should have not focused that much on this comment, but
Mm.
spend more time on my guest, or maybe sometimes I look a bit distracted. But that's kind of part of the game, and I think you may notice this when you're rewatching the video, but I think when it's live, it's actually okay because people understand that. I mean, I'm just someone behind the computer, especially right now that it's fully remote. I am on my computer, so it's slightly easier. I don't have to have a third device. I can look at my guest and look at the comment discreetly. So it's slightly, it's actually easier.
Yeah, I see. No. Um, so you've like transitioned through sort of the lockdown period quite easily. And I would imagine like I've watched a couple of your videos. Now you're having sort of guests from far flung from Singapore to Hong Kong. And like, yes, that sort of new diversity, getting that type of impact in must be very fascinating for yourself and hopefully for your viewers.
It is, yes. And you're right. Since we're doing it completely remotely, I thought let's just ask people around and not just limit ourselves to London. And that leads to very interesting discussion. I didn't just interview founders, but also people from the maker community, people who are just working with startups. So I managed to kind of open up a new door with the lockdown and talk to more different people from different places, better understand different ecosystems, and that's fascinating. Yeah.
Ah, I've got to ask, like, just like because now the sort of world is now your oyster, as they say, which would be your sort of top three guests you would like to have on, like entrepreneur gaming?
I don't think I have a top three, to be honest, because quite often I like to be surprised. And I think if I already know too much about my guest, it's not funny, it's not interesting. I actually like to have my list of questions and not follow that at all, because what my guest says is so interesting. And, I do all my research before, but I'm actually learning a lot, even sometimes from people I already know personally. And I end up having some, you know, tips and tricks and stories that I never heard before. So I actually prefer to be surprised rather than having the perfect guest. And, because also I focus on early stage startups, I find it very interesting to hear from people who are not necessarily the people who you hear from in podcast or other formats, because they're kind of quiet and just building their own thing. So it's still very early days for them. But what I would love to do is, maybe in a year or in 2 years, being able to continue these formats and see again my guests and see what they became, how the company turned out, what happened to them, and having some kind of comparison between what they said before and the challenges they've been through, and hear the story like between the gap, what happened during this time.
Oh, no, that'll be very interesting. Ah, great, great. Now, before I move you on, like, what was the game? What made you fall in love with computer games?
Well, I've been playing games since I was a kid. So when I was very young, I loved playing Pokemon. I think that's the game I spent the most time on. But then I stopped playing for many years, and I got back to it a couple of years ago when I eventually had a proper setup, a proper desktop, and proper computer to play games. And since then, I've been playing lots of games. But recently, I think I've been very much enjoying the Mass Effect series. Yeah, especially the old one.
Mass Effects, like yes, my sort of game playing days go way back. It's like yes, I think what was the game? Just trying to think. Like because I hail from a time where the arcade was king, and went along, paid your cash, and yeah, you played. Double Dragon was my game back then, and yeah.
I wish I knew this time. I mean, I had my all different Game Boys. I had them all, and I was spending so much time. I remember when my mom was trying to get me out, and I was trying to find some shade to play because you couldn't see anything on your screen. But the more, as I grew older, I see all these TV shows and movies about arcades, and in some way, I wish I was born slightly earlier to live that.
Well, put it this way, there'd be like a group of kids huddled around a machine, like social distancing, not even a thing. Just like everyone breathing in unison until like, yes, you either got kicked off the game. Like I went through the time where it was like, yeah, Street Fighter, which came along, Street Fighter and Double Dragon. You could play as a team and you make your way through, and that sort of ushered in a whole bunch of games. Then Street Fighter came in, and yes, it got kind of depressing at some times when you see a kid who's like 5 years your junior, like, yeah, basically lay the beat down on you. So, and smiling. Yeah, but it was a good time. I miss it, but yeah. But now it's just so much easier where you've got mobile games and everything like this. Thankfully, I'm 5 years now over my sort of Candy Crush addiction. So yes, I get a special pin. But yeah, it's great. But yeah, I do miss it. You like, hey, but you are in an absolutely brand new time. Look, there is now esports, which is huge. Well, like huge now, but it's going to be even bigger, and that's taken off. So, so that's a fantastic thing. Yeah, I have to ask, what is a VC scout?
That is a very good question. And I sometimes hope that more people ask me the question before sending me the deck. So a VC scout can mean different things depending on who you're talking to and what kind of VCs you're talking to.
Yeah.
So I'm a VC scout with Backed VC. And Backed VC is a VC fund based in London who is investing in all over Europe at seed stage in startups. And so they have created a community of scouts. And what they call scouts is a community of people who are involved in the startup ecosystem, whether because of their job or because they just love it. There are also some investors, some angel investors in this community, some founders, bunch of different people who because they're involved in the startup ecosystem, they come across lots of founders who may be raising money. And so we facilitate some introductions. So when we come across a startup we think would be a good fit for the fund, we can just pass the deck on and make an introduction, talk to the team about them. But that's not just about introduction. It's also about sharing our own expertise. So sometimes when the fund is reviewing some deals, they ask us for for some answers. They ask us what we think about the deal, but also what we think about this trend or this ecosystem or this industry. So it's more of a very tight and curated community of people involved in the startup scene who are between founders, investors, and all this small world.
Yeah, you mentioned the deck. What is a deck?
So a deck is well, we talk about a deck of slides, right? So it's just a presentation. But right. When we talk about startups and investments, a deck is a powerful tool. It's what you send to investors and what people will keep once you're done pitching. So, even if you manage to get a call with an investors or a meeting, they need to have something they can go back to. And so the deck is a series of slides, generally not too long, something that is easy to read, that summarizes what the business is about, the target audience, how much you're looking for, and just all the different information about the company. And that what the investors and everyone else will just get back to when they talk about the specific company.
I see. So like with this, like with a VC scout, like the way you've explained it, it can mean a lot of things to different people. Like what, like, so when, like, what's been one of the sort of meetings you've ever had where they've just like basically went, hey, you're a VC scout, and went, you must be doing X, Y, and Z, and you went, no. So that's like,
yes.
I
think the main misconception is that people think I'm part of the team. And so they quite often send me a very bland and non-personalized email just saying, oh yeah, your fans may be interested in this and that, and we can do this together. And I'm like, hold on a minute. I am not part of the company. I'm part of the of the VC Scouts community. So I'm not an investor. I'm not investing myself. Don't try to convince me, or you can try to convince me, but I'm not going to be the one asking you for a meeting. And like, there is a limit. And when I said I wish more people ask me what a scout is, that's because I receive so many emails like that, where people are just like, oh, look at my slides, check my deck, and tell me if you're interested in investing. And that means that they didn't really spend the time to do any research about who they're talking to. And Backed is a fund that does this with the community, but they're quite clear about it. If you go on the website, you can see that they're really talking about this community and not being part of the team. But I think what can be confusing for people is that some funds are doing it very differently. So some funds called Scout, people, they give money to invest directly in startups.
right.
Especially in the US, there are quite a few funds who do that. So the notion can be confusing because it can mean different things.
Right, I see. So now, like, we are in the post-lockdown world, and like with regards to the pre-lockdown world and the whole sort of world of like VC Scouts and everything like this, has there been a sort of monumental shift, or is it just nothing's really changed? What's the sort of landscape right now?
So I would say it was very hard for everyone as soon as the lockdown started. Especially, I'm thinking about, for example, startups who were in the middle of a product launch or in the middle of a campaign, where they had planned some kind of physical events or things like that. And, they had to rethink everything in a very short period of time. But that's what building a startup is about also. When you build a startup and when you're in this ecosystem, you have to be flexible. You have to be able to adapt to anything really quickly. And that's supposed to be in the DNA of what a startup is. And so even if it was harder for some people who were in the middle of a product launch or middle of something, I found that very quickly, in about a couple of weeks, everyone managed to find a way to think about what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it, and kind of change the plan around the situation. So I haven't really met many startups who were in deep trouble. Sometimes even if their business model were based on something very physical and having everyone at the same place, some of them came up with very interesting idea to still be relevant, even if their initial business model was not working anymore because people couldn't meet with each other. So I think it's all about being reactive, and there are definitely some changes. And I think right now people are kind of tired also of the situation. When you think about the lockdown and when it happened and when the situation, the global situation started being more serious, people were in a mode where it was like temporary. And now it's been a long time already. It's been months and months. And so I think in people's mind, it's important to stop talking about post-COVID because we don't know if there is such a thing or when it will happen. And, getting back to normal, it's something I don't really hear about anymore. It's more about when we can safely meet again, and we can't just talk about, oh, in 3 months it will be over. So it's kind of already the new normal where people find new ways to do things. So I think startups are in a good position because it's easy for them to just adapt and rework with what they have and the situation. So I've seen some positive things already, and I have lots of confidence that it will actually make lots of companies stronger because they will, because they've been through that already. For the future, they will try to make the company more secure or more ready for this kind of unpredictable situations.
Yes, I know. Like, this is the thing. Like, when you say, like, I say post-lockdown, I don't say post-COVID at this moment in time because, we're rolling strong, and like it's going to keep going on for hopefully not much longer, but you know how it is. I think with regards to, like, I was in the mindset of, yes, Easter next year, things will be back to normal. And I had a conversation with someone on the podcast where he works for Dropbox, and he went, basically everyone in the tech community went, don't come back to the office until June 2021. I was like, what? So if you got some of the smartest people who are working in that, go, nah, June. My sort of I had to sort of readjust my sort of schedule with that. Seeing as we're in lockdown 2.0, the confusing one, tears here, tears there. It must drive people crazy. And but I like the fact that you, like, one of the things which, doing my research, which did surprise me is you talk about, yes, companies adjusting everything like this, and you yourself being a VC coach, you looked at everyone and went, did you say I could do better than some of my people I've scouted to start up WildMeta?
No, I've never had this kind of thoughts because I've worked with startups founders all my life. I started when I was 18, and since then I've always been surrounded by founders, and so I love the way they think and the fact that I have lots of admiration for them. So I have never really heard the presentation thinking, oh, I can do better, because building a company is it's very personal, and it's not just, oh, I saw an opportunity and I'm just going to do that. Well, sometimes it started this way, but very quickly it's about how you do it, the execution, your passion, and that will change everything. So who am I to judge other people's work? So I'm more sometimes criticizing the way they are going to present it or an approach, but I would definitely not think, oh, I can do better and I'm just going to do better than them, because that's not true. It's very hard to just come up with an idea, build a foundation, do it on your own, convince the first people to join you, and like the entire process of building a company is very hard, and it's not the easy way to do anything. So no, I wouldn't have such a judgment on anyone.
I see. So what is WildMeta, and basically the name WildMeta? What do you do with this, or beautiful new company? out in the world?
So that's a very good question. WildMeta is a startup I started last December, and I really went full time on it with my co-founder in February. So what we're doing is we're building AI bots for esports and competitive video games. So the idea is to build first a platform where players, especially Dota 2 players, can get better at the game by playing with bots that are powered by AI. So there are already bots in every game, right? But here, our bots are designed to really be more human-like, and to really help players. So building this platform at the moment, we're still very early stage. So that's why it's kind of hard to find anything about it online at the moment. Anyone doing some research may have to really dig a bit further because it's not that easy. We kind of kept our profile, but we launched the website just a couple of weeks ago, just because we have, my co-founder and I, we have both a network, and we've both been talking to a bunch of people, like going to podcasts, talking to friends, and we reached a point where it didn't make sense anymore to stay in stealth and not to have a web page at least. So that's why we published the website, but we kind of kept a profile so far, and so that's what we're up to. So we've both been full-time on it since February, and we're still working on the core technology. We're building a deep tech startup after all, so we still need to get the core technology right and performant to be able to show something to the world.
Yeah, like
especially talking to gamers, like, if you have to talk to your target audience and show something to players, it's slightly different than when you're building a SaaS product for startups, for example, because they expect to see something really quickly if you start talking about what you do. So we keep this low profile because we don't want to start marketing to them or anything until we're ready for that and we're ready to have a final product in 2 months or something.
Wow, like 2 months, like that is quick. That was
no, we're not. I mean, we will start talking to people when we reach this point. Yeah,
I see. So with that, because like with computer, anything when it comes to computer development takes time, and getting it to sort of work on sort of many sort of different games. Like, what do you think is going to be the time scale on something like this?
It's very hard to tell, especially at this stage. I would love to launch towards next year, sometimes next year. But it's so as I said, we're starting with Dota 2, and that's a game we're working on at the moment. And right now we're still working on the core technology. And so with the AI, it's interesting. It's not like software development where you can have a very clear idea of all the steps and like it's just about doing it, right? Here we're talking about something very new, and yes, it has been done in the past, but not everyone can just do it right now. Otherwise, well, other people will be doing it, right? So it requires lots of research and development. And so my co-founder is working on it at the moment, and we still need to reach a stage where what we've built is strong enough so we have visibility on the time frame. So I would say right now it's slightly too early to have a strict time frame, but we're getting closer and closer every day to have this visibility. But we still need to reach the stage where we have a real visibility on how much time it will take to build on that. But yeah, that's welcome to AI and deep tech, I would say.
Yeah, no, like because I think it was Marcus Brownlee, MKHD. He was at Boston Dynamics. They were reviewing the new scary cyber dog.
Oh yes, Spot.
Yes, who was like they were just going like taking it out and about, and they went into a little bit of how AI was playing hide and seek, where it was a case of had a basic map, and then you just saw it went after generation 1, 2, it was just like then like something interesting happened around about sort of generations, something like, I can't remember the exact one, it may have been 500, where like the like little bots like went, okay, if we block this door, they can't actually find us. Then it was like, yeah, then another sort of 500, maybe 1,000 generations later, the actual other team worked out if they used a board and then used that as a ramp to jump over the screen, then they can find it. It was just like, okay, when you start doing an AI, I would imagine practice system, like how far are you going to let it sort of like go off on its own? Are you just going to be like, okay, you can go this far before it's going to be like some expert level where you can't actually do anything at all?
What do you mean by that?
No,
I'm not sure too. I get it.
now, basically, like with when you got AI, it practices and practices and comes up with new strategies, which we might not think of ourselves
I see.
to like come up with solutions. And like if you're practicing against an AI opponent, which is great, like, you know what I mean? It's like think totally different. Will that AI eventually become such an expert that it goes, right, I know the map like this, I know this, and I can like say like with say a shoot 'em up game, I know if I do this, I've got them all the time.
So I get it. So the thing is, this already happened. So a company called OpenAI used AI to play Dota 2, so the game we are focusing on. And they actually did a big competition with professional players playing against the AI, and they most of the time lost. Actually, all the time they lost. So they already built that, but the thing is what we're doing is slightly different, and we can't really let that happen, because what we want to do is to have bots that have a more human style. So we don't want, it's not about winning over human players, it's about helping the players get better. So we need to make sure that our different bots have a specific level that matches the player's level, and also that is not doing things just crazy to win, but have a behavior that is just a normal behavior. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for players to train against that if at the end, when they play with real humans, the strategies are completely different. So they need to train with strategy that already exists, and something that really looks like what a human will do. So our plan isn't to make an AI that is so good at the game that is just winning, coming up with strategies that human can't really even imagine, or just that doesn't make sense for a human because of that. So we're controlling this completely. So it's not like a black box that just does whatever it wants to train. We are really controlling every steps of the training.
Yeah, no, I had to ask because, like, yeah, when you go AI, I was like, look, everything. What's it? Anytime you say AI, expert system at one particular thing, it wins eventually. It doesn't give up. It doesn't quit. It will win eventually. But yeah, so with this, like launching it out there, like so. I imagine it's going to be a case of, will it be a case of you have your own sort of independent sort of combat fields where you, like people can practice, or it'd be something which would just lay on top of the game, say?
It will be connected through the game, yes. So I don't have the final path, I will say, for the players, but definitely it's going to be directly plugged into the game. They already, like, that's why also we choose this game to start with, because it's very open. It's kind of encourage the community to create and to access the API, access the data. So that's why we're focusing on that first. But yeah, the idea is it's just a way of having a different opponent and to pick a specific type of opponent.
Ah, excellent. Like this is the thing. Like when you start talking to the sort of gaming community, is this something you've heard people like go, I really wish I could have practiced against someone, not getting fragged by some 10-year-old kid who's like saying weird obscenities about my like birth or lineage.
I wouldn't say they don't necessarily formulate it this way, but yes, people are complaining and talking about what's good and what's bad about games, right? They're very vocal, especially on Discord servers or Reddit subreddits. And so it's very interesting. I'm actually right now doing a survey on different groups with players to better understand the training and what they think about some tools available. But yeah, globally, you raised something very important, is that the toxicity of the chat. And actually, some companies are trying to fight that in some ways or other ways, but it's a problem for this kind of games. And so I've heard so many people who stop playing because of that, or people who would like to train to do something specific, but they just can't. Today you have tools, you have solutions for analytics, so to kind of guide your progress. You have also coaches that are more and more present in the scene, who analyze your game, so help you understand your weaknesses, how to play this and that. But when it comes to really train, there is not really any options, right? You can play with other players, but you face to be potentially harassed or like insulted for doing something, or you have to agree with everyone playing with you that you're going to play this specific role because you want to train on that, or you're going to try this new character, this new hero or whatever. It's very hard. So yeah, that's very problematic. So that's why right now I'm doing a survey just to gather a bit more data. But that's something we saw everywhere in lots of discussions. Streamers also mentioned that a lot. And there is a big trend that is also quite bad that is called smurfing. So it's when people create different accounts, and basically you have someone with the main account that is pretty high level and they're very good at the game, but they have a second account, and so with the second account they don't really have a high grade, right? So they don't really have a rank, and so they play with people who have a lower level. And they win, but it's not fair because the matchmaking cannot know that they have another account. Like, it's a mess. So having a platform like what we're building will actually create a safe space for everyone. So whether you're trying to avoid the chat, avoid insults, or just want to try out new things, it's just a safe bubble.
I never thought I've been introduced. I've learned something new. Smurfing, there. Like, I can imagine that would be. I don't see someone who's hired how that benefit them, but ego's ego. I take it. But yes, but oh my lord, Smurfing. What else do I not know about the whole gaming world? It's quite mad.
Well, it's changing all the time. It's one of these industries that is always moving, always new words. You have to really keep up with everything.
Yeah, I see. Like, with one of the sort of, like, what do you think is going to be some of the changes you think might happen, say, in the next, say, 6 to 12 months, you might see?
Specifically for esports?
Yeah, esports, or basically the VC sector itself.
Oh, that's a big question. So I think for esports, it's an industry that is growing massively and it's getting more and more mainstream. So I think we will continue to see that in the coming months. And also, I think more and more people understand that it's a real industry. It's not just a bunch of young people playing games, but it's actually lots of business, lots of more and more professionalization behind teams. So I think we are going to continue to see more and more people investing in that, not just investing in terms of money, but also getting into the scene and bringing the scene closer to a wider audience and people who don't necessarily know about esports. Recently, especially with the lockdown and with the situation, we've seen lots of traditional sports getting closer to esports. Like, I've seen lots of professional footballers, for example, who decided to play football video games and take part of competitions. And I think, this means that the gaming scene and the esports scene is actually getting closer to a wide pool of people who are not necessarily naturally gamers or interested in games, but through this kind of bridges, there are more and more people who are getting into it. So I think it's going to continue in the coming months. And in terms of VC and investment, I would say having everything remote isn't changing much VCs. VCs are always moving around. Quite often they are managing a large geography, whether it is national or international.
Mm-hmm.
And themselves, they are quite often, in a meeting here, in an event there, so they can work remotely. The difference is the relationship you create with VCs, especially early stage. Early stage investments is all about the entrepreneurs and the people, and so you don't necessarily just invest into a concept, but you invest into a team, you invest into some people who are going to make something out of the idea, right? And so for some people it's an advantage, but for some people it's actually difficult to convince just through calls and through a screen. I've talked to some people who told me they're not really good at writing emails, and they're not really good at talking to a screen, and they know that if they will meet in person they could actually convince investors, but through the screen they find it very hard. And other people, more introvert maybe, I found that they sometimes find it easier. So I would say it's changing things, but more for founders who have to convince and to build a relationship through a screen, it might be slightly more difficult, but also open some doors.
Yeah, no, I can understand and relate to how people can go, yeah, if they were in the room, it will have a much more better chance, because I think, well, you should know this better than I, because you've done more interviews like with people present, that there is there's a certain different energy with regards to the conversation, the flow. You just I think you pick up things a little bit better than over what we're doing right now, Zoom or like any sort of video conferencing.
Completely.
Yeah. So it's not, I can say, yeah, definitely most probably is not easy for those guys. But yeah.
Completely. When you're face to face, you see people how they react to some question. You see when they are uncomfortable. You see when they want to say more. You can actually, something that is actually super annoying over videos like that is when you have a conversation and you just want to jump into what someone just said. You don't want to interrupt them, but sometimes you want to add something. And so with video calls, because sometimes there's a slight delay, you can't really do that. So you have to wait until someone finished, and then you have to take notes and to say, oh yeah, I agree with this point, and you said that about this, I have to say that. It's slightly less natural. You can't have live interaction. You can't really also monitor when someone wants to jump into what you just said or add something. And when you're face to face with them, you actually see them, like you see they raise the eyebrow, you see that they do something with their body that notifies you that something is going on, they want to do something, and that changes everything. Yeah.
Excellent. Now I've got to draw into, seeing as I'm an immense cosmic being of immense cosmic power, I have the power to grant you one wish, and one wish alone. What would that wish be?
Ooh, I wish I knew that before. I have no idea. Let me think.
And you can't wish for more wishes. No.
No, of course. I don't really have a wish, but maybe I would wish for all the people all the people who want to do something to just have the strength to start it right now, because that's actually a good time to start something new. Especially right now, there are new opportunities, and sometimes some people who may feel trapped in a situation, they may not jump and take the leap to do something new. So everyone who has something in mind, just a slight idea or something that is bothering them or anything, that they have, the strength to just start something. And if they're facing some difficulties, maybe they're not the only one, and so maybe there is a product to be made around that, or a startup to start, or a project, or a video, or whatever, a new project. And I think right now is a very good time for that. So that would be my wish.
Ah, perfect, perfect. Yes, the power to start something new, something special, something fresh in this world. I will get working on that for you right away. What I would like to say is, could you tell the lovely people out there how they can find you in this big wide world of ours?
Yes. Well, I am on most platforms, but I'm not active everywhere the same way. So I would say, if people want to just have a chat, follow my news or anything, the platform where I am the most active on is definitely Twitter. So my Twitter is simple. It's just my first name and my last name. So Amandine Flachs. Then if anyone is interested in my videos and interviews, I do live AMAs on my YouTube channel. So it's also easy to find, just my name, you should find it easily. And then people can also connect on other platforms like LinkedIn if they want, but just be sure to add a message saying why you want to connect, because I get many of them and I reach a point where I don't have the time to try to understand why you want to connect, and then take the risk to get an ad or something, a message saying, oh, do you want to hire people in this country or things like that. I'm not, so...
No problem. I'd like to say thank you, Amandine, for coming on today. You have been a superstar. I'd like to say thank you to my friends out there, my life warriors, for watching the show up until this point. I would like to say stay well, stay safe, be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic, be all the positive bees you can be in this world and more. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye. Yeah. Oh, and we are